Stay tuned for another episode of Voice of Rio when we talk about recruitment and retention. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Voice of Rio. I am Dean Heather Duda, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Rio Grande Community College. Normally I'm joined with my co-dean, Dean Donna Mitchell, but she is not here tonight or today, so it is just me. But don't worry, you don't have to listen to me the entire time. I do have some guests. When we talk about school, we often talk about the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But in higher ed, we know that there are 2 important R's, recruitment and retention. This year, the president has devised a task force for just those 2 things, and I have invited today the co-chairs of 2 of those subcommittees. So there are actually 2 subcommittees, 4 co-chairs, and we have a co-chair from each of those subcommittees. So joining us today is
Shannon Dalton. I am the co-chair for the recruitment committee.
And I'm Stephanie Alexander, and I am co-chair for retention.
And I serve on the retention subcommittee. And I thought that the 3 of us could spend the time today just talking about some of the recruitment and retention efforts that we are not only already putting into practice here at Rio, but also looking into the future in the hopes that we can use our efforts wisely to both recruit students for the upcoming academic year and years to come, as well as retain students who are currently here. So I'm going to put both of my guests on the spot, and I'm going to ask them, because I know they both done a lot of research in this area, and I'm going to ask both of them to tell us maybe the 1 or 2 biggest problems, so barriers or hurdles that we face for both recruitment and retention. And I don't know, we're not going to go in any sort of order, so I'm just going to let you do a free-for-all and what you think the barriers are that we face either individually as an institution or in higher ed in general.
I'll let Shannon go first.
Okay, well, I would probably say that right now one of the barriers that we are facing with the recruitment side is who is our population that we're wanting to target. We have, what we have known as the traditional student, which has been those who have graduated high school and entered into higher education straight out of high school with a diploma, to what has been the non-traditional. And non-traditional students I have found have had a huge, diverse number under a single label. And when I've been asking the question, are we really looking at a non-traditional student, or they really are new traditional?
So what you're saying is that we've traditionally in higher ed lumped sort of 18 to 23 together,
yes,
and then we've just said 25 and above, and we've assumed that we recruit that whole 50-year span of people potentially,
right,
or more into one area, and that our recruitment efforts need to be parceled out a little bit more?
Yes. I know that, we have quite the variety. We have those students that are returning, due to work related reasons. We have those students who are parents that have that opportunity now to return to higher education. I know that we see on the retention, it all sort of falls on the retention side, where we have those students that were stopped out and are coming back in with an opportunity. We also have just our international students, but we have a lot of adult learners that are returning, just even for their own interest.
I think what goes with that a lot is we have students in that 18 to 25 range that are not really what we would classify as a traditional student. They do have families, they are working a job, so they don't fit that classification that has traditionally been part of that 18 to 25 year range of just my full-time job is to be a student.
Yeah.
So they're actually a traditional aged student in that sense, but at the same time they're living a non-traditional lifestyle. And I think that's where the retention comes in. We often do practices that are geared towards that 18 to 25 traditional demographic, when actually that group of students is actually a non-traditional demographic as well.
So if we've got all these demographics, and really we can't lump them easily into maybe two categories, as has been done traditionally in higher ed, to the detriment, I think, of effective recruitment and retention. But we are also a small school, and of course we like many smaller schools, have smaller staffs, right? And smaller resources, people, time, money, those kind of things. So how do we start? How do we start knowing that there's multiple subgroups within any demographic? Where do we put our efforts? How do we decide where to put our efforts? How do we start parceling out those resources to get the, for lack of another phrase, get the biggest bang for our buck?
Well,
well, with retention, you want to be more proactive. You want to do intervention instead of waiting until after the fact. So Shannon mentioned students that stop out. So why do they stop out? That's something that we need to know. Is it a financial reason that maybe we can help fix? Is it because they just don't have the time? And for a student that needs to stop out, leaving on a healthy note is very essential as far as financial aid goes and academics. We don't want them to leave and not know the process for withdrawing properly, or the process, some just don't withdraw and then they end. I mean, the faculty have to report a grade and they end up suspended and they don't even know it, you know, because they didn't realize the process to withdraw. So a lot of the things that we need to do need to be on a more proactive note so that they have a better footing when they come in. And those come through like your first year experience programs, which, you know, need to be for all new students, not just that 18 to 25-year-old bracket. And then maybe developing some interventions along the way so that we can target students that might need an academic boost. We recently, one of our initiatives with retention was to do a 4th week reporting, where if we felt that maybe a relationship needed developed with the students, and it could have been due to lack of, you know, coming to class, attendance issue, it could have been, you know, maybe poor grades, just like if the faculty member just felt that this student was slipping a little bit, and that way we can target that at the 4th week rather than at the traditional midterm time, which is more like halfway through and it's really too late. So that was one of the initiatives that retention took on to do, and it was quick, and we're waiting to see the results of it. We're going to kind of close the loop with that and see how many successful contacts we had, and as far as like did the advisor successfully reach the student to see what the problem or the issue was, and we're going to kind of look back and see how that went. But being a little bit more proactive is something that retention has been looking at.
Okay. That certainly would be a great way to target our resources and our time and our efforts. What about with recruitment?
Well, actually, you said sort of proactive. We're actually trying to find ways to engage our communities more through social media. We're trying to apply that a little bit more. We've got Jessica Patterson that we've brought on board to try and look at more Twitter and Facebook and other exposures, utilizing our social media tools to reach out to our communities in hopes that it would not just focus on to our younger, but also some of our further out groups. I know that they had done a social media campaign, I think it was on the CDL, was it? Where they had posted about offering a course or workshop, I think, on that, and they had a large turnout because of that.
They did have a lot of success with that, yeah. And do you find that different groups use different social media? I mean, that I can say anecdotally from my own use of social media what I gravitate towards.
Well, I'm
not. I'm still using that Facebook.
Are you still on MySpace, Heather?
I am still on Facebook.
I think that's where I have that sort of unique standpoint, being a non-traditional student myself. You know, I'm 40, I have 2 kids, one's 18, the other one's 21, so I sort of get that, but a lot of the students I'm around, they're 18. You know, I have found that I use Facebook a lot, but a lot of others use Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter. They've evolved into the other social medias, and I'm actually challenging myself right now to utilize those as well.
And I think that's where we're trying to challenge ourselves to use a little bit more social media. So I think that that's sort of one of the directions that we're going. I know that also, just trying to get involved with our communities is another, way that we're looking at trying to interact more.
I think that's a great way to strengthen those bonds between institution and community. And I want to come back to an idea about closing the loop, but for those of you who might not be as well informed about higher education, I just want to take a moment. When we talk about closing the loop, what we're saying is we often do a good job in higher ed, and I'm going to talk generically about higher ed, and every institution will have its positives and negatives in this area, its strengths and weaknesses. But we often have these really great ideas, we put them into practice, and then we just let them go, and we sometimes forget to take a moment to find a stopping point in our data collection, in our initiative work, to actually assess what we're doing to see if it's meeting the outcomes, and if it is, how we can continue to have a strong initiative. If it's not meeting the outcomes, how we can go back and rework or tweak or rethink what the outcomes are, the processes are. And that's what we call closing the loop. So I want to come back to the both of you and ask, so this is one of the things we aren't as strong in higher ed with closing the loop, and it's kind of one of those catchphrases today in higher education. So have your committees talked about, you've got these things that you're trying, how you're going to close the loop? Can you talk a little bit about what you plan on doing once you've tried something to see if it works?
Well, I know that on the recruiting side, I know that they're looking at better ways to find, who it is to get in contact with. And that had been a challenge, because where they have a large number of students that are applying and trying to figure out that, they've been able to apply a system to, better provide some insight as to who to look at in questions. So
questions.
That's one avenue, but it's hard to say, exactly how, because we're still trying. I think we're having a harder task.
And the recruitment subcommittee, your closing loop might just be how much do our enrollments go up, stay the same, and hopefully not go down. So I really think that yours might be sort of closing the loop might happen come August or throughout the summer, and comparing orientation numbers and those kind of things. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, because you're really, even things that you can put in place right now, you're really not going to see come to fruition until school starts in the fall.
We won't see any. We probably won't see any of that until the fall, or even depending on when, like on specific programs, how we've increased, enrollment based off of promoting better on specific enrollment dates, like within the nursing programs or some of those more specific ones, we may actually see an increase, but we won't know until after we see the enrollment numbers.
Right. How about with retention? How do we close the loop?
Well, with retention, we were leaning towards a more proactive stance with our advising. So utilizing advisors to make some multiple contacts throughout the term with students, in particular, an early alert, which is sort of what we discussed earlier with the 4th week reporting. So it's an early alert, if it's not going well. And then midterm reporting, of course, contacting students that are looking a little shaky at midterm. And then doing some advising, getting ready for that registration, that pre-registration period that comes towards the end of the term to get you ready for the next term. And some of the things that, we know that advisors are contacting students, but we've never said, did you have a successful, we've never counted to see how good we are at doing that. And as an institution, we need to know how good we are about doing that. So that is actually one of the things that we want to try to improve on, and our closing the loop is going to go back and look at to see, did we have successful contacts, and if so, how many? And are we seeing anything as far as maybe referrals to tutoring or seeking out some other additional supports? So closing the loop to us is a little bit important, because otherwise, if the faculty is doing the reporting and it's just kind of sitting there, it's just sitting there, and it's not really, it's information that's not really being used, and we want to use that information, to its fullest potential.
I know that so often we do an initiative and we forget to report back
Yes.
on how that initiative has gone or what we hoped to achieve or did we achieve that. One of the things that I hear coming out of this task force is a desire to communicate that better. So not only communicate what is going on, but also the outcomes. And then as we close the loop, as we assess, reporting on what we're finding. So is this initiative working? Is it not? And I think that that is just really an awesome part of what the task force is accomplishing, because I think that's going to help change culture and so that we become a culture of looking at closing the loop, not just initiating. And so again, I think that that will be a valuable experience.
We need to make sure that it's a valuable, you know, I mean, why do things that are not of value when you could be doing other efforts? So it will help us gauge that.
If you both could do any, if you had all the resources in the world and you could each choose one thing that you think would make a huge impact on recruitment or retention, I'm not going to ask that you have to stay within your committee, so maybe,
well, that's good.
maybe
so,
you don't. So what would be that one thing that doesn't matter, you have all the resources in the world to draw on?
I've always said, and I will always say this, I would like a brainwashing machine. I think that would help. You will go to class, you will go to class. I think a lot of our students come to school, no student comes to school saying, I want to stop out, I want to fail out. No one says that, but they get in a little too deep and they have some situations that they just, you know, either life gets in the way, finances get in the way, the academic piece gets in the way, and they just cannot do what they originally set out to do. So I really think that, you know, some of the support services that we offer operate on a shoestring budget. And, you know, you can pour all the money in the world into it, but you have to go back, and you have to say what really helps a student. And I think for our particular area, hire an auto mechanic. I cannot tell you how many times somebody's car, there is no transportation in this area that's affordable to someone who does not have a car, even if it's just temporarily. I mean, there's countless things we could probably throw around and say, oh, more tutors, whatever, but you know what? It goes back to life. It goes back to, you know, some kind of a subsidy or something. When a student, we compete with a part-time job for most students. They've got a part-time job and they're competing with their academics, and when push comes to shove, the one thing that they're going to do is they're going to let their academic piece slide because they have to eat. They have to have housing. They have children. They have to, you know. So I think, you know, that the financial piece is sometimes the hardest piece for our students.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to absolutely agree, considering, you know, I have been going through my own challenges as a student. I am a full-time student and I go to work full-time, and I have actually watched my academics slip because it got to a point where I was working 51 hours while attending school. So I have often said, and I've said this a lot this semester, I wish I could get paid to come to school. You know, that would be, you know, if no one...
More on-campus jobs.
More on-campus jobs and opportunities, you know. And I've actually, I think I talked to Seth Lawrence. I said, hey, do you have a job for me? Because I would just love to just work here on campus, because then I wouldn't have to commute to another place or whatnot. And I think probably the only other thing I would probably add on that is having daycare again or something like that for our because I have a lot of friends who have their own kids that they either they can't afford daycare, or they have to decide on, well, do I come to class or do I stay home with my sick child? Or when they do, they get penalized for, you know, not attending because they're a parent and they took that first.
So there's always a spike in absence whenever we have like a spring break. The schools have a spring break. So you know, I think, what if we had something for children to do here? Like a I don't know, a kids college kind of week.
That's true,
or something that would help take care of those child care issues, where it's a drop in and you know, if it has to be a charge, it's a nominal material, like a $5 or something. But I think there's a lot of things that could be done if you had the finances in order to you know, to do it. About working, you know, a lot of times students that have an on-campus job, it keeps them engaged with college, their college climate there, and they're more likely to stick. If they have a little 10, 15-hour job on campus. That's the theory behind work study.
Right.
It's just that we do not have enough of those positions.
No,
we don't have enough of that, to offer that. But that would be a very good solution to a lot of our students' issues.
I agree. I think that's a good wish list. So hopefully somebody out there listening, if you're looking for some place to donate a large portion of money, we've got a couple of really great ideas right here.
You have a brainwashing machine that you're not using.
That you're not using.
So let me ask, because it sounds like a lot of what you're both talking about with retention and recruitment intersects quite a bit, and I certainly, I'm setting you up for a question that I probably already know the answers to.
Are these a string?
These are, so I'm kind of combining them. So my question is, how do we see recruitment and retention working together, especially in regards to high impact practices, those practices that really do a good job of engaging students, of getting them to a campus, so recruiting them while also retaining them. Can you talk a little bit about sort of maybe where recruitment and retention might dovetail and seamlessly move from one to the other?
Well, once you've recruited them to come here, you need to help them transition here, especially if they're from an urban area where there's a Starbucks on every corner.
Yeah.
We have a lot of students that go through a culture shock. I mean, we're a rural campus, and not only are we rural, there's like nowhere within walking distance, really, if you really think about it. So a lot of students who are used to having a lot of things, or hopping on a bus and stopping various places, that is a dynamic culture shift for them. So you need to help them with that transition. They need to be prepared when they come in to know what to expect. Cows, and that's about it. So I think that when we're recruiting, we have to maintain the understanding that don't just grab anybody and bring them. Bring ones that you feel you can either transition well, or that want to come, and then there's a fit there that needs to be made. Otherwise, you just have a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, I know that another thing is we have much smaller classes.
Yes.
And so that's a great way to highlight is that you do get to know, I mean, you get to know your professors, you get to know your dean, you get to know
and on the
president.
flip side of that, if you want to go and just be disappear into a 300-person lecture room, we're not the institution.
We're not the institution for you, right?
You are going to know your
professor
and your dean.
You are going to know when you're gone and not there. So.
Because it's hard to miss attendance. As a professor, it's like, okay, I have a class of 8. Well, 2 of you aren't here today.
Yeah, and
I'm going to notice
2.
that, and I know exactly which 2.
Right. So what do you, because you just mentioned urban areas and sort of bigger classes, so what do you think a school like, I'm not even going to go with OSU, because we all know OSU, is
well, you
just
get on a bus to go to your next class.
Right. But talking in terms of, say, larger schools, something like an OU or another state incident, Miami, Kent State, those bigger schools, they have a lot larger enrollments. So what do you think, as compared to Rio, what do you think that they maybe have that allows them to facilitate large recruitment and retention efforts? Is it just that they're used to that size, so they have the infrastructure, or do you think it's something different? Do you think it's resources? Or do you think it's location? What do you think might they have that Rio doesn't, that allows them to recruit in the way they do? I'm not saying that Rio doesn't have great recruitment and retention efforts, but
we do. But we have a small, when you can compare it to what the other schools are doing. We have a small, they're all road warriors. They're out there, working long hours for not a lot of pay. And we also have with that, certain territories. As a community college, we have a certain mission to our little territory here. But with the larger schools, they attract students with a lot of different programs. We don't have a lot of program variety as compared to them, and they also tend to be a lot more flashier because they have the resources to be a lot flashier. So,
so they've got the Starbucks on campus.
On
You don't even have to
campus,
go
in the
away.
library. And we're like, our closest one is like 45 minutes away.
Right.
But I don't think that students tend to come down and take a look and say, oh, I'm not coming here. A lot of students come down and they think it's very charming. They think our campus is very charming, the ones that are the out-of-towners, And at the same time, you know, they might not want to be lost in the big pool. So I think
Sure.
we attract students who are interested in the smaller
Yeah.
classes, who want a more personal relationship.
Right.
So it's a different body of students, I think, that we're you know, recruiting. Yeah, I know that recruitment might, you know, say no, but I don't think that we're necessarily competing for the exact same students as the ones that go to OSU or OU or even like Shawnee State. I think that our students that come here usually like the little small coziness rather than a large. I mean, we still have students that complain when they have to walk. You know, they drive from Woodhall over to the Bob Evans building. And I'm like, and we have fabulous parking. There's tons of
We do have a
fabulous
lot of parking anywhere I've
we
ever
do
been.
not ever sell parking permits
No.
like some of the schools. You're not up there
No.
sitting like a vulture waiting for your spot. Now they do sit out in the waiting for the one beside the door.
Well,
But we have a lot of we do have a lot of things to offer that other campuses do not. And I think that sometimes we don't really compete with the other schools like we may compete with other smaller schools, but not with the larger ones like we think we do.
and I'm glad you said that, because my ending question was going to be, what do we have that's positive, and you answered that.
Plenty of parking.
And I'd like to actually put Shannon on the
Okay.
spot as our student. What drew you to Rio? What ultimately made the decision for you to come here?
Well, it was local. You
Sure,
know,
there's nothing
was,
wrong with that.
I had the ease of commuting, but it was the attention and the small classes. And I have to say, I've been at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where I disappeared, and it was the worst experience of my life. And I have moved all my life. I've been in different areas where there was urban settings, but it was really having the small setting, and it's why I care so much about Rio and why I really push, you know, for a lot of students to embrace their experience here and really get to know their faculty.
Well, and if you want to know one of our most involved students, we've got a lot of very involved students on this campus, and we're sitting next to one who just really jumped into work with your major, and you do also you do honors and the psychology club, and I know you're a huge advocate for your peers. I mean, really, I think this is how you make the most of any college experience right here. So much so that you are co-chair of a committee where you are the only student. This isn't a student committee. You and your experiences are so respected and valued that you were made co-chair of the committee. And so I just want to wrap up because we only have a few seconds left, but we are really doing some really amazing things here with recruitment and retention, and we're really, as a campus, focusing on those areas in a way that I think is exciting. Some of the ideas that are coming out of both subcommittees, I think, can really revolutionize and change a lot about our campus, not only who we bring to campus, but making it so that our students are successful when they're here. And ultimately, this task force is about the students and creating the best Rio experience we can. So I want to thank you both for coming. I think this could even be another episode, maybe in a few months after the task force has had some more. We're going to close the loop on Voice of Rio in about 6 months, and we're going to see how these task forces did. So thank you very much for joining us on another episode of Voice of Rio, and we'll see you next time.